Okay, we're doing an interview with Jim Condit Jr. He is currently a congressional candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives out of Ohio in the 8th District. And, Jim, I just wanted to let you know that this interview is going to be embedded in an article I'm writing. The title will be Exclusive Interview with Author of Open Letter to Donald Trump. And so you'll be able to find it there at examiner.com. And
okay.
I thought it was really important to talk to you. I understand you recently wrote an open letter to Donald Trump, and you're very concerned about possible election fraud issues, particularly starting in the Iowa caucus, which is coming up in just about 10 days or so now. And so let's just start for the readers and listeners with a little bit of your biographical information, if you could.
Okay. I got dragged into this in 1979. We ran a slate. I was 26 years old. We ran a slate for city council in Cincinnati, and I had read an article in 1977 by Dr. Susan L.M. Huck in the American Opinion magazine. She eventually was the assistant to Congressman Larry McDonald, who went down in Korean 2007. And that said that the computers were being installed all over the country, and a lot of times in the middle of elections, you'd have a computer breakdown, and the challengers who seemed popular would go down to the bottom, and the incumbents would get reelected. And the article was called "How Elections Are Stolen." When I read that, I said, "Oh, I guess that's happening some places." Well, we saw it happen before our eyes in 1979, and a big jump for one of the most unpopular incumbents from losing position into one of the 9 winning positions. So that dragged me into this. We filed suit in 1981 against the Cincinnati Board of Elections, Hamilton County, and a Judge Richard Niehaus made a ruling in 1985 on this case that said there are no safeguards against the computers being programmed to distort the election results. Our expert witness was Robert Strunk, who was in charge of the Xavier University, very brilliant man, and he said in his report to the judge before he made the ruling, to trust in today's computerized elections is an act of blind faith. That's a paraphrase, but he said it was an act of blind faith. Now, that's been the case, and there's been, we brought forth a wiretapper in 1985, Leonard Gates, who publicly said he was hired to wiretap the election computers in Cincinnati in 1979 and 1981. When he came out in 1985, then he four Cincinnati policemen resigned. People in Cincinnati Bell admitted, their trucks had been stolen and used for wiretapping, but they didn't know about it, quote unquote. Got to 60 Minutes, but of course 60 Minutes dropped the election fraud part. They just concentrated on him wiretapping famous people for Cincinnati Bell.
Right.
So at any rate, then in 1990, skipping ahead to finish this bio, hopefully with points that are important and interesting, 1996 I was in Dubuque, Iowa, supporting Pat Buchanan, and we organized a vote watch group and proved beyond a shadow of a doubt with eyewitnesses in 41 classrooms, and the county chairman of Dubuque GOP, who was an honest guy named Rod Bloom, posted it on a big blackboard in the hall of Hempstead High School. Even though he was a Phil Graham man, he was an honest man, and he posted the results right there on the blackboard based on the eyewitness reports of his own people and our people in the 41 classrooms. Right. And the next morning, the GOP, working with Voter News Service out of New York City, which is now called National Election Poll, stole 13% of Pat Buchanan's 969 votes. Dole had come in second with 339 and so forth. But they stole and published in the paper by AP Wire all across the world that Buchanan only got 800 and some 60 votes or so in Dubuque. So that means they stole 130 votes roughly. They stole 13% of Buchanan's vote, and we were the only one watching a county. There's 99 counties in Iowa, and we were only Dubuque County was being watched. So if they stole just 4% of Pat Buchanan's vote as an average of all the counties, and Buchanan, not Dole, won the 1996 Iowa GOP presidential caucus, and the Des Moines Register, Lori, actually printed that many thought Buchanan had won, not Dole, in 1996. They printed that in 2013 in relation to the next story that I'm going to tell you. And that article is, if you search Google for A House Without Doors by Jim Condit Jr., then you'll see that article was published in Chronicles Magazine, 1996, has never been challenged, been sitting there for 20 years. Well, the next big thing, there's more. I could go into all kinds of other skullduggery.
But Jim, I'm going, I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm going to put a hyperlink down below in the article so that people can go and see and read about that.
Absolutely, and everybody should go to the article to get that and more hyperlinks we won't cover. So the next deal that I want to jump to, because we could say a lot of things, but in 2012, our group, which had been called Citizens for a Fair Vote Count in 1996, was renamed Watch the Vote in 2008. And in 2012, one lone caucus goer named Edward True found that at his one caucus out of 1,800 caucuses that year, they had added 20 votes to Romney in his little caucus in Appanoose County. Edward True is a 28-year-old handyman, had never been to a event before, and he raised his hand and was one of the 5 or 6 people that counted the votes of the 80 or so people that showed up. Maybe it was 100 people at his little library in Appanoose County. Now remember, this is one of 1,800 local caucuses that year. So he went home to check what they put up after they ran it through the computer at Iowa GOP state headquarters, and to his somewhat shock, he found that instead of Romney being credited with 2 votes, which was the truth, he was credited with 22 votes, okay? So in that one precinct, Romney got 20 votes. Now, Romney had left New Hampshire because he couldn't get crowds big enough to fill the foyer at a Pizza Hut, while Ron Paul was getting 300 to 3,000 people at every stop, okay? So anyway, they announced that night Romney is the winner by 8 votes. So Edward True went on CNN's website, was begging for help, and one of our volunteers, we had 1,900 people supporting our Facebook page, and Judy Spady of Colorado and Mike Smith of Texas saw him asking for help on CNN's Facebook page, called me. My dad and I did an affidavit with him to help him put down what he saw, and then that was released to the press. CNN picked it up, and it's you're linking the articles in your article, linking the videos in your article, and they're also at open letter to DonaldTrump.com. So people can watch those 2 CNN videos to get how Edward True, one lone person, and Watch the Vote combined, and then the press picked it up, and the GOP was forced to change the winner. In other words, Lloyd, they announced the wrong winner in 2012 on January 3rd. Mitt Romney went up there, took the ballots before the worldwide cameras. He got all the momentum in media coverage, polling, and fundraising. And 2 weeks later, 2 weeks and 2 days later, on January 19th, the GOP was forced to certify Santorum as the winner because the 8-vote margin of Romney could not hold up against the 20-vote discrepancy that Edward True had found. Now, only Edward True had done this all by himself. So this time, the one reason we put up open letter to DonaldTrump.com is because we thought, based on what we're seeing, Trump is the most likely to speak out and say something that nobody has been willing to say really bluntly in public for the last 40 years. Since
and I think it's important also that it's pretty easy when you know how these things happen to suspect that, it's always an anti-establishment candidate that the establishment obviously is trying to stop. And this time around especially, you've got to suspect that if they're going to cheat a candidate this time around, most likely it would be Donald Trump.
And probably also Rand Paul to kick him out of the race for various reasons. But Trump
now, I know from, want to stop you there for a second. I just wanted to add that I know from some of the research I did on that 2012 Iowa caucus, even though the winner got changed officially from Mitt Romney to Rick Santorum, thanks to your group and Edward True, but also, according to research I did, I mean, Ron Paul was the one we suspected would be most likely to be cheated because he was, awfully anti-establishment to say the least and a threat. But I found that, the polls still, right up until the end there, still were showing Ron Paul ahead. And then he all of a sudden comes in third. And so I did some checking on the numbers on the Secretary of State's website. And I remember even double-checking months later. And they actually showed still a bunch of zeros in counties that were said to be strongholds for Ron Paul. So really, we really still don't know if history has even changed the real winner of the Iowa caucus in 2012 to the correct person.
That's right. And watch the vote 2012 and watch the vote 2016. Does not endorse anyone. We want a fair count for everyone, but we're not blind. And what we say to Donald Trump in this open letter, he's getting the exact same treatment as Pat Buchanan got in 1996 and Ron Paul got in 2008 and 2012. Exact same treatment, exact same talking heads from the establishment like Bill Kristol of the Weekly Standard, who is connected as you can get, coming on TV and asserting this time Donald Trump will not be the nomination, with arrogance and hatred almost, and a concealed hatred in his voice. They're saying that, I contend, because they know that these computer counts, especially in New Hampshire onward, can be fixed. And secondly, if nobody's watching, the Iowa GOP, which are, in my opinion, the culprits for sure in the Iowa caucus, the local people do an honest job at each of this time it's going to be 1,650 or so caucuses. The local people and the local county chairman do an honest job. They call in the results, or this time they're going to punch in the results in some kind of a system Microsoft set up after they do the hand count in front of everyone at each caucus. But these guys, it's the state level that they run them unnecessarily through a computer and alter the vote counts. And I believe they did it on purpose. We proved they did it to Buchanan, and they would never correct it. That's what shows you they're guilty. They'd never address it, never correct it. But when CNN and the local TV stations picked up, now they were forced kicking and screaming to change the winner, and they tried to discredit Edward True for a week.
Right.
And it was in my mind, Lori, these people and all the people running these secret elections in the other states, they're disgusting. They're worse than criminals that hold up a bank, and I'm totally against armed robbery. But these people are worse because they're stealing the whole country, and it's time America get outraged about it and demand open counts, like, quite frankly, they do in the Iowa caucus. But we gotta, this time we want 1,600 Edward Trues at each caucus, so that they watch the vote, take a picture of their cell phone with a tally sheet, and make it impossible for the Iowa GOP, the Democratic Party GOP, or anybody else to alter the votes once they get to the state headquarters.
Okay, well, let's get to, and, well, I know you really were lucky in 2012 that you even got the attention of CNN and willingness for them to even report the story.
Yeah.
Because, I know this has been your passion, you've said since, the late 70s, early 80s.
Right.
And I've, been involved in it only for about 8 years. And I can't get, when I have proof of something like this happening, in my state, for instance, can't even get local news.
Oh, no,
to cover
it's a total
the story, much less national news. So I think it's been increasingly getting very hard to even get this story out. And so that was one of the reasons that prompted me to contact you and to do this interview. So let's get back.
It's always been almost total censorship. What happened there is that Erin Burnett of CNN was in her first week on her show Out Front, and John Avalon of Newsweek picked it up and went. And they thought it was a great story. One, it was not about computers. It was about the Iowa caucus, which is conducted properly. So it wasn't attacking the computer system, which I don't believe they would be allowed to do. The second thing.
Well, I haven't found one yet that will.
Yeah, the editor, and they also thought it was maybe a little way to kind of bash the Republican Party because they're both liberals. And some people tried to use it to say, gee, we shouldn't do it this way anymore, this hand-counted, it's where everybody can see it. Let's go to computers. Some of the establishment were trying to use it. So maybe that they were, but anyway, they were allowed to cover it. They did a great job, and the 2 CNN videos are linked on your article and on openlettertodonaldtrump.com in the menu.
Okay, so let's get focused on what prompted you to write this open letter to Donald Trump? I mean, let's focus specifically on what is it you're trying to accomplish by writing this letter, and what would you like to happen, or what are you trying to get to happen?
Well, the letter could be addressed to all the candidates or any of the candidates. It's really for all Americans. We're trying to get this issue of how the Iowa caucus has been altered at the top by the GOP headquarters and their computer counts after the local people did an honest job. We don't want that to happen again. We don't want them to come out and announce the wrong winner again. And but we addressed it to Donald Trump because he's getting like 1,000 times more attention than anybody else. And it isn't just that the networks are loving him, it's that he was providing them with really tremendous ratings and revenue every time they had him on. The debates 4 years ago were getting 2 to 3 million people even I think the main debates were not doing that well. He went on the Fox and the CNN, and they get like 25 to 28 million people. So he's getting the eyeballs. He's also willing to say things that apparently no one else is willing to say. We would like every campaign, we're doing this with a week to go, so they would have a chance still to do it. We would like every campaign to send their people to each of these 1,600 caucuses, both Democrat and Republicans, tell them to write down the vote as they announce it, and then take a picture with their cell phone of the official tally sheet and email it to an address. And I'll give the address we have set up, but if the campaigns want to do it themselves, they can set up their own address and tell them to email those cell phone pictures. Then the GOP and the Democratic Party cannot alter the votes. Now, here's an interesting thing.
So people wanting to get involved in this, first they can read your open letter to Donald Trump, which is the title of the letter, and I do we'll have a hyperlink to that in my article, so they can go to that website that you've set up that shows the whole letter that you wrote publicly to Donald Trump. Okay. And then from there, if they want to help and be on the ground at one of the over 1,600 caucus locations on February 1st, what is the email address that they send this to? Right.
It's on the website, and it's on our Watch the Vote 2016.com website, but it is watchthevote2016@gmail.com. That's watchthevote2016@gmail.com. They just they snap a picture of their own tally sheet. That's what Edward True did. He had made one himself, and he just sent a picture of that to the press, and it's up on those websites. Exactly what his tally sheet and exactly his affidavit, what it was. But better to take a snapshot of the official tally sheet and send that.
If you can.
Now,
if they let you.
And they should let you. If they don't let you, you know something's wrong. The Democrats, of course, are one location, the Republicans another. But if your campaign is doing it, if the candidate you're supporting is doing it, then by all means cooperate with them. But it doesn't hurt you to also send a snapshot of your tally sheet with the location you're at to watchthevote2016@gmail.com. Doesn't hurt to send it to two places. And then we hope the others will put it up on the on a public website that all the world can see it, preventing the Iowa GOP or the Democratic Party at state headquarters from altering the Iowa caucus in 2016 at all.
Okay, and as from what I understand from reading an update on that openlettersdonaldtrump.com website,
Yeah.
I believe you put on there that, is it Sanders' campaign that is also
that's a breaking news.
This?
Yeah, breaking news. The only guy that's gone public, and this was in response to a question, Bernie Sanders' campaign is going to watch the vote with their own app at all the Democratic locations. Gretchen Carlson on Fox News on January 19th, about 2 p.m. Eastern Time, brought out about this Microsoft system, this Microsoft Cloud that Microsoft's invented for both parties, and they got little iPad-like things to punch in the vote after they do the hand count by show of hands at each local caucus. Then they send it in with this iPad-like device. Well, she said, are all the candidates going along with this? And the reporter in Iowa said, no. The Bernie Sanders campaign said they don't trust the process. They're going to be double-checking it with their own app at each, and he better check it, because the establishment will try to cheat for Hillary against him.
Yeah.
I'm not a socialist, and neither are you. We're Constitution Party type people. But look, Sanders is on the ball here. I wish he would say it in his speeches, though, and that's where you put the Donald Trump thing up. If you look in the menu there on the open letter to Donald Trump, you see that we have exact instructions for Iowa caucus, exact instructions for New Hampshire and beyond. Okay,
right.
So we tell them what to do. So ideally, let me just say this, Lori. Ideally, to answer your question, finally, ideally we would like Donald Trump to get up in his speeches this week and say they announced the wrong winner. I'm going to channel Donald Trump the best I can here, okay, and hopefully he picks it up. Something like this. They announced the wrong winner of the Iowa caucus and the GOP in 2012. They announced the wrong winner. We can't have this. So we're instructing all of our supporters to watch the vote at the 1,600 caucus locations, take pictures, and then we'll get the right winner this time. If he would say something like that, if each campaign, they all have conference calls with their people. If each campaign, not only Trump, not only Rand Paul, someone in Rand Paul's campaign tells me they're doing it, but they're going to keep it internal, which is almost useless. You got to threaten the GOP statewide and the Democrats that we're watching. You got to threaten these people. I'm telling you, these are the enemies of the American people in all 50 states and at the RNC and the DNC. People might think that's an extreme statement. I can't help, but that's what I've experienced for almost 36 years now. Is these people? They have one rule: we win and you lose, and they do it by altering the vote.
Yep.
The voters lose, and the insurgent candidates and the voters, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we would like every campaign on their conference calls in the week before the Iowa caucus to tell their people, go and mark down the results when they call them out. Take a picture of the official tally sheet, or at least take a picture of your own tally sheet, and email it to their address, or email it to watchthevote2016@gmail.com. Now we got them, and I think this is going to happen. And there is going to be some public. There's already been. I did an interview with J. Michael McCoy on WHO, which goes into all of Iowa. It's a talk news radio station. And on the Monday of last week, which I guess is, I'm not sure what day it is now. Today we're in the 24th, so maybe it's 23rd, 22nd, 21st. So it's probably the January 19th. He's got up on WHO. You can download the show, and we're at right after 11 o'clock. For 4 minutes, he did a tremendous commercial. He's sitting in for Jan Michelson, who had a stroke, who's the main hope he's recovering, because I knew him when he was in Cincinnati. But J. Michael McCoy did a tremendous 4-minute promo, and we have that up, I believe, on both the Watch the Vote website and the Open Letter to Donald Trump website. And he did a tremendous 4-minute promo for people to watch the vote. So it's already been publicly announced over the biggest radio station in Iowa, heard all throughout Iowa. And there's going to be more public publicity through the media on people doing this. So the Democrat and Republican Party better watch out if they're planning to do any shenanigans this time. So that's basically what to happen. If Trump or others will announce it in their speeches, especially Trump.
So basically you want the word to get out publicly so that, number one, you can have help in watching the vote in Iowa on the ground. And then number two, hopefully scaring anybody that might want to try to, have a fraudulent winner emerge on election night in Iowa.
Right. I mean, just by Sanders announcing he's doing it with his own app, that may deter the Democratic Party, and the publicity otherwise might deter the Republican GOP. But if Donald Trump would say it in one of his speeches or a few of his speeches, something like I said here, it would bring it to international attention right away. And it has to be brought up in advance. Every candidate has a responsibility. I would say they've been neglecting it since the 70s, a responsibility to demand a fair and open count for their supporters. I mean, they're asking for a lot of time. Most candidates are asking for money. Trump isn't. But so you have a responsibility, candidates, to demand a fair and open count, like they do in the Iowa caucus, for your people, and you just got to watch what the state does, and that's what we're going to do this time. Now,
it's shameful that in the only state, at least in the primary, or should say the caucus, that actually does the counting the right way, that they still end up manipulating it.
That's because that's because all us everyday people, we're honest, we're playing honest. Believe me, the people running this country in the Republican parties are not playing honest. They want to make sure no one ever gets in, and the presidency especially, who's going to reverse these destructive policies we're witnessing for the last 30 years. Now,
Okay,
the last 25
I
years.
wanted to I know you don't have too much time left, but I want to just make sure that people understand, and maybe you could talk a little bit about it. This isn't, obviously the first contest is in Iowa, but after we leave Iowa and the contest moves to really all the other states, the other 49 states in the primary process, then there isn't any transparent count. So can you talk a little bit about that briefly on what the American people are up against in trying to get a fair vote count in the other states?
Yeah, that's when the real problems begin, when we get past Iowa. In New Hampshire, 80% of the vote is counted on secretly on computer programs. Only 20% is counted in the open. So that means that in the 20%, which is about 120 polling places, the Trump campaign or the other campaigns could send witnesses to those hand-counted places. The other 260 places, roughly, are counted on computer. But you can't. It's not logical to say the 120 that are counted by hand are going to be vastly different than the ones that are counted on the computer.
So at least you've got some kind of minuscule check and balance there to send red flags.
That's on the in New Hampshire, okay? But if Trump, let's go to South Carolina now. South Carolina, there is no paper ballots, as you know, Lori. Hardly anybody else knows that. No paper ballots. So they go into a little
tape. No
tapes.
At all.
So they're breaking their own state law. They're violating 3 Supreme Court decisions, which we detail in the open letter to Donald Trump. You go in and you punch a touch screen like you were a worker at McDonald's hitting Big Mac. Okay. The problem is, at least if you order a Big Mac, you get a receipt. In South Carolina and on other states, you don't get a receipt. There's no paper. You're supposed to believe that little bleep of energy that goes through the phone wires is supposed to be counted right somewhere, and they can fix it any way they want. I believe that's how Lindsey Graham gets reelected every time.
You betcha. Betcha.
So at any rate,
and then one of the things that to point out of what's so absolutely nuts about South Carolina not having any kind of proof of anything is, Jim, they can't ever conduct a recount.
Well, no, there's no way. And in Bev Harris's book, which is free online, Black Box Voting, just Google that, it's free online. Chapter 2 and Appendix 2 goes over case after case where they had, like the challengers won at one little city in Florida. They were all cheering. The whole room was cheering. They come out 10 minutes later and say, we were wrong. It's actually reversed. This is where they had no paper. The incumbents won and you challengers all lost. So there's no way to check it. They can cheat with impunity. And that's why the establishment talking heads, whether all of them realize why they're being told to say this or not, and some of them are in the know, like Bill Kristol, Weekly Standard, I believe, they're saying, South Carolina is the firewall for the establishment. That's where they're going to stop Trump. Yeah, they can fix the vote. Now, Trump needs to say, and if anybody plays this for him, he likes tough talk, so let me have some tough talk to the Trump campaign and to Donald Trump himself. If you don't plug this hole, Mr. Trump, you will lose. They will cheat you out of it by these secret computer counts. After New Hampshire, they're totally no checks and balances on Election Day. Some of them have paper, but there's no checks and balance on Election Day, and it takes 21 days to get a recount, plenty of time to switch the ballots. So you've got to announce in advance something like this. And Rand Paul could do it, Ted Cruz, any of them could do it. I just don't know if anyone but Donald Trump will do it, and would do it if he gets if this message gets to him.
Courage to do it.
But he needs to say, folks, we just found out there's no paper ballots in South Carolina. This is ridiculous. We don't have any way to check the vote count. We want an open count with paper ballots. Then if he loses, whether he really loses or not, half the country will think he was cheated. So that is what you got to do.
And then I want to clarify to people listening to this that aren't familiar with the problems that we have. If your state has paper ballots, you still, in my state, every single one, 100% of our state ballots in my state run through programmable scanners.
Right.
It makes our election just as riggable as anybody else's.
That's right.
And we have a policy of zero audit. Not one single paper ballot in our state is ever pulled, not any percentage, nothing. Zero of them are ever pulled to be audited.
That's the same as Ohio and almost every other state. I think.
Right, and believe me, they will not let you get your hands on those physical ballots to actually count them, to recount by hand the vote.
Well,
they won't.
They need to. Well,
you could watch it. You could watch. You could stand there all night, and the public can go and witness ballots being put in the machines, in the scanners, but you really aren't seeing anything because you can't see how the computer program what it's doing to the tallying of the votes and how it's putting each vote to each candidate. So it's still an unconstitutional secret vote count.
Yeah, illegal.
So I just wanted to clarify that because you were referring to paper ballots, but that doesn't mean you're in the clear. In fact, we know that all 50 states, the vote can be manipulated easily.
Yeah, and the important
and nobody will ever know it.
Right. Well, right, and the paper ballots have to be counted before they leave the public site. That's the rule. It's paper ballots. Oh, we can double check. No, they can. In 21 days, if I was trying to steal the city, the county, the state, and the world, I could switch the ballots to make the computer count look true. And by the way, people might be saying, this sounds like crazy talk. Surely I can't be learning this from two nobodies, one from Ohio and one from North Dakota, and I was never told this by Sean Hannity. Yes, unfortunately, we're the ones telling you the truth. But there is a HBO movie called Hacking Democracy with Bev Harris of Black Box Voting. Get that movie in 90 minutes as a documentary, and you'll see the state of elections. They really prove it on there of exactly how easy it is to rig these computers. But if you don't have paper ballots and count them before they leave the public site, it's
at
useless.
The precinct by hand.
It is useless. But we have that nowhere except 20% in New Hampshire, like in the November election. All the states, Ohio, Iowa, everyone uses these secret, illegal, unconstitutional, against 3 Supreme Court decisions, against the Declaration of Independence, against the Constitution type counts. And at some point, Trump could bring it to international attention and maybe save his own race. Because here's the problem they have. Jim Collier who wrote Vote Scam: The Stealing of America, and who I worked with from 1985 to 1988 till he died. By the way, our Cincinnati story is chapter 12 of that book. But Jim Collier used to say once they get the computers in, they can do anything as long as it's believable. Now, here's the problem they have with Trump. He's got 1,000 times the celebrity of Ron Paul and many times a celebrity of Buchanan. Pat Buchanan was a news guy, but Trump is a celebrity for entertainment and billionaire, and he's getting 5 to 30,000 peoples everywhere. And again, the other candidates can hardly fill the foyer of a Pizza Hut. Same with Hillary. Hillary is and Bernie Sanders is getting the thousands of crowds. Hillary can only meet with 5 people if she pre-screens them, or if the Democratic Party forces their county employees to go when she comes in town. So this is where, how are they going to make it believable that all these crowds and all these, these online polls where Trump gets 60%?
Yeah, and that would bring us to a whole other subject, and that is the way we've got phony polls that often come up, and the press claims that some candidate is surging at the last few days. Anyway, when you know what the game is, you recognize all this stuff as they're saying it.
Yeah, and people have to realize that the 5 TV networks and AP Wire own News Election Poll, who control all the big media websites on election night. And so they have been covering up the existence of this whole system. And part of the system is we got 4 companies. Now it's down to 3 companies: ES&S, that's Election System and Software, Hart Civic, and Dominion bought Diebold and Sequoia. So there's only 3 companies now, big computer companies hired by 99% of these handful of companies, maybe a few other small ones here and there, are hired by 99% of our 3,200 counties. So we have 4 mysterious companies, privately owned, hired by the counties to process 96% of the vote. That's from a Nation article, the Nation article by Ronnie Duggar in 2004. And then we got the media covering up what's happening, so people never think about this. They never think about how the votes are counted because it's never mentioned by the big media, hardly ever. And then you have the RNC and the DNC into it up to their necks because they're encouraging all their state Secretary of States and counties to hire these 3 or 4 companies. So they obviously, why would all the Secretaries of States in all 3,200 counties minus about 10 hire the same companies if it wasn't being pushed on them big time from their superiors in the Republican Democratic Party? So this people say this can't be true. This is a conspiracy theory. It's not. Go to Wikipedia or just put in National Election Poll, used to be Voter News Service, and you'll see right there that they admit that it's owned by ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, and Fox, and that shows that their competition, this is the same company that does the exit polls, so the so-called competition that the networks claim they're having on, we call George Bush in Florida and all this baloney, they're getting the same exact information from the same company at the same time, and it's a company that they jointly own. So it's like a joke.
It's mind-boggling.
It's like a joke on the American people. And so when you get past, if anyone from the Trump campaign hears this, or if, and we're going to link this, we're going to link your article on Open Letter to Donald Trump for the last week before the Iowa caucus, and we're going to keep it there. If anybody gets this, then you've got to protect yourself by bringing this up, challenging it. And if Trump's the only one that can do it the best because he's so dominating in all these metrics that you can look at, especially these big crowds that wait in the cold and freezing weather. And even the reporters are saying that. These people are probably going to go to the caucus, and they're probably going to vote because they're willing to wait out in the cold for a long time to see Trump. So he's the one who's going to look very suspicious, but he's got to bring this up. We don't like these secret counts. We want an open count at the premises with the paper ballots. And now he's done himself a service and the vote and the country and the world a service because we've got to get our elections back. Right now, we have no idea who was elected to president from this system's been in place since 1988.
And we don't have any idea who really is elected as our governors,
right?
Or to our city
senators,
council, or to our state legislative seats. Senators, it goes on and on.
Or congressmen. And I could go. We could go on for another hour on suspicious races where things flipped at the last minute. But again, people should, the links in your article will start leading them to everything they need to know. But all they need to know is you don't have to understand computers. When someone wants to count your votes in secret, you've got a problem. And so the Iowa caucus is right. If we watch that the state people don't change it, all the rest of the states are blatantly committing treason, subversion, whatever you want to call it. Actually, Lori, although I wouldn't advocate this if it got exposed, I'd give them 2 years or 1 year to fix it. Actually, every one of these county election officials, county commissioners that are letting the votes being counted in secret by private companies they hire should be arrested. Their only reason to exist is to give us the vote count that the people do, and they've abdicated the responsibility, turned it over to these private companies. And by the way, and this will be up on YouTube soon, I've had it for 2 years, it's just what I can get around to do. At a meeting in Cincinnati, Tea Party meeting, 2012 October, the Secretary of State, John Husted, in response to a question from me, and my friend owned the hall and he recorded it in audio, he confirmed that all the counties in Ohio signed contracts with these vendors like Hart Civic and ES&S and Dominion that they are not allowed to look at the software or inspect the software in any way that tells their computers what to do on election night. So we're not worried about voter fraud, a Mexican running around voting 3 times. That may happen, but that's not anywhere near the problem. The problem, Lori, as you know, is the election vendors. We're worried about them, the people that supply the software. We're worried about them switching 10,000 votes in the blink of an eye, which I believe has happened in every key election.
And, just in closing here, that's a good point that you brought up. The press doesn't have any problem talking about blaming the voters. Voter fraud. No, this is election fraud. That's the problem. And I give this example just so people can kind of hopefully get their head around what we're facing here. And that is, and I mentioned this, and it was really the main reason why I ran twice for Secretary of State in my state, once in 2010 and then again in 2014. And that was to try to get some of this information out and get people thinking. So that we can, start doing change. But as far as I would give this example to illustrate how meaningless at this point it is to go after voter fraud. And that is this, simply, right now, from what you've described, it would not matter if 100,000 people in your state each voted 100 times. If they can flip the vote to a fraudulent winner, it doesn't matter how you vote or how many times you vote. And I think once people get that concept and that reality around their head, and the fact that obviously everybody knows computers are programmable, then they've got it. And if I'm hoping that your project here in Iowa will help to, bring this to a forefront. And certainly any of the presidential candidates, all of them have a platform to finally break this problem to the American people.
Right,
and
right.
So
incidentally, what you just said there is very important, because Jim Collier, when he was alive before '98 on radio shows, he would bawl people out who started to talk about people voting 2 and 3 times. He says, listen, that's all part of the. We don't want that to happen. We want rules against that. There are ways to stop that, which the Democrats especially don't want to do. They don't even want picture ID. But the point is, there are ways to stop that. But he used to say, that is just to add to the confusion. It doesn't matter what you vote. It doesn't matter what the people voting twice vote. They switch the results. The vendors, the election vendors, can switch the results, and I have been proven in some cases to switch the results. As I say in Chapter 2 of Black Box Voting, the book, and the Appendix 2. But the point is, and other places since, But it's the election vendors who are hired by the counties, who provide the software that nobody's allowed to look at, and that's the courts have protected their privacy on their software programs for decades. Jim Collier used to say, "What's the big secret? It's one for you, one for me, one for you, one for." Where's this proprietary software that has to be protected? It's all just a way for the ruling elite to direct the world, and if their publicity fails, if their billions of dollars of publicity for Hillary or Obama fail or whoever, then they can fix the vote and put it in. Victoria Collier, the daughter of Jim Collier, has said, you can't vote the bums out because you didn't vote the bums in. Now, one other example real quick that you had reminded me of before we come on was what happened to me in 2010 running against John Boehner. Would you believe that I was running on the Constitution Party against Boehner and a Democrat? Well, it was a year of outrage like this year is, almost as bad as this year, and I had Constitution Party after my name. Now, that is powerful, Lori. That's a great name, and people were mad. And it came all night. It was on MSNBC. It was on ABC. They ran all four of us in the Boehner race, not only the two, because I was coming in second all night. It was announced on Channel 5 in Cincinnati, and Terry Tranter, who's a former state rep, now retired, called my dad, also retired. They knew each other, and he said, congratulations to your son. I don't know how he beat the Democrat. I was coming in at 20%, Democrat at 16%, Libertarian at 4%, and Boehner was coming in at 60% all night, okay? Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying, I had some name recognition for various reasons, but I think it was the Constitution Party after my name that got me in the final count. 100% of the votes counted, 100% of the precincts in at 12:30 Eastern a.m. After half hour after the election day, and the next day they got the final count. And Boehner had like 140,000, I think. I had 36,000, roughly. The Democrat had 29,000, and the Libertarian had 4,000. Okay, so 20 minutes. A friend of mine was snapping screenshots from all of the websites, and they all changed at the same time, and that shows you that News Election Pool, owned by the 5 networks, has been given control of all the big media websites regarding elections. They're the only ones that announce anything nationally on election night. So it's 20 minutes after the vote was finished, and they said 100% of the precincts counted, 100% of the votes counted. I lost 33,000 votes. I was down to 3,000 votes last. They added those 33,000 votes to the Democrat. He ended up with 66,000 votes, and roughly, and Boehner stayed the same. So now the election looked the next morning like people are supposed to think it should look. The third parties don't have a chance, Lori. They don't have a chance. The people love these incumbents when it comes to voting. So that's what they wanted to look like, but we got them dead to rights.
Right.
Let me tell people where to.
It's the two-headed or two-winged one-party system.
Right, and they can see that at votefraud.org. They can go and click and see the top. It says proof of vote manipulation in the Condit Boehner race.
Right now, Jim, just to clarify, this vote, those 33,000 votes that were stolen from you on election night, was after the final results. After, I think you had told me before that the Cincinnati newspaper had already gone to print, right?
Yeah, well, they had to. It was 12:30. They want to go home. They took the final count at 12:30. So the next morning in the Cincinnati Enquirer, I still showed with 36,000 votes beating the Democrat by 7,000 votes because they had gone home before the crooks in New York City switched the results.
Right, and it was then the fraudulent results were spread to the nation via the national media. Right,
and of course no reporter or talk show host in Cincinnati covered it at all. This is where the censorship comes in. This isn't interesting to them that the vote changed by 33,000 votes, switching from the Constitution Party guy to the Democratic guy 20 minutes after the final vote. That's no interest to the press. So no, this is the people can lose their careers in the press if they try to go after this issue. And quite frankly, Lou Dobbs was going after it a while, and suddenly then he was going to be fired from CNN, and he resigned, and he's with Fox, but they got him in business only. so he can't cover this type of thing.
Yeah, Lou Dobbs is wonderful, and he has exposed other things in the past as well.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Okay, well, Jim, I really appreciate you granting this interview and giving of your time and expertise, and I will have this posted up on the
Lori, listen. Yeah, and thank you for writing the article you did, and being. I know you've been interested in this subject and are kind of an expert in it yourself. But that's only from the hard knocks. I mean, we all get dragged into this, and there's no rewards except for telling the truth because you're going an uphill. But let me say one other thing about the 2010 Boehner race when they stole the 33,000 votes and gave it to the Democrat. People could see the actual screenshots from the various websites at votefraud.org and click on the proof of vote manipulation, the Condit Boehner race. They can see the websites, the screenshots that night as the vote count progressed, and then as they changed it back at 10 to 1, changed the final count so that the Constitution Party guy came in last. So they can see all that. And thanks to my friend John Weisskettel, he sat there at the computer for hours snapping these screenshots. And I said early in the evening when we found out I was doing well, I said, John, if you can do this, they're going to do something. But John went way beyond what I asked him to. He sat there till like 2 or 3 in the morning, and if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have these screenshots. So they're there. And again, thank you for writing the article. And I really appreciate it.
So now I hope that you're able to get enough attention so that hopefully we'll end up. I mean, the whole object is to get a fair vote count. In this upcoming first contest in the Iowa caucus for all the candidates, so that all voters will be able to be assured that their vote really got tallied correctly to the correct candidate of their choice. And that is the whole, that's the whole purpose of all
of Watch the Vote. I mean, you can tell I got my own opinions. You got yours. But as Watch the Vote, we want a fair count for everybody. We've said in 2012, because they were bashing Ron Paul so bad, we want a fair count for Ron Paul and everybody else. This year we might say we want a fair count for Donald Trump, Rand Paul, and everybody else. If anybody in Iowa hears this and spreads it to other people in Iowa, when you go to your caucus, write down the totals as they announce them, snap a picture of the official tally sheet or your own tally sheet, and mail the picture in with what caucus you were at to watchthevote2016.com, and then we can make sure we get the right winner in both the Democratic and the Republican Iowa caucus this time.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Best of luck to you in this endeavor, and I hope that they're able to get the word out on what you're trying to do there for the American people. And so, because we know that the Iowa caucus being the first contest is so important to set the tone, however it turns out for the rest of the presidential race. And so it's so important. Okay, thank you, Jim. I'll let you go, and I will publish that article as soon as I have the copy of this recording for this interview and put it on there, and I'll have some good information for the readers down below in the article, additional information as well. So thank you very much, Jim. Good luck to you.
And at the YouTube, we'll have a link to your article. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Bye.